What makes a man lose a woman's respect faster than he can realize? It's not always cheating. It's not always lying. Sometimes it's the subtle ways he gives his power away without even knowing it. Men don't lose women because they aren't good enough. They lose them because they forget how to hold themselves like men. This video isn't about playing games. It's about learning the unspoken rules that separate high-value men from desperate ones. If you've ever felt like you're doing everything right, but still losing her interest, it's time you knew the 6 things a man should never do with a woman. Step 1. Never beg for her attention. There's a silent language between men and women that most men miss entirely, and it's written in the way you hold or hand over your power. The quickest way to hand over your power is by chasing attention like it's oxygen. The moment a man starts begging for a woman's time, energy, or validation, he's not expressing genuine interest. He's signaling emotional scarcity, and that signal kills attraction. Because attention that is demanded never feels valuable. It feels cheap, forced, and desperate. When a man double texts because she hasn't replied, over-explains why she should care, or constantly tries to win her over with compliments, he isn't making her feel special. He's making himself look replaceable. The more you chase what isn't being given freely, the more you quietly teach her that you don't see yourself as the prize, which makes it impossible for her to see you that way either. A man who begs operates from fear. The fear of losing her interest, the fear of being forgotten, the fear of not being enough. That fear bleeds into everything he says and does. It's in the tone of his voice when he asks why she hasn't called back. It's in the eagerness of his responses when she gives him breadcrumbs of attention. It's in the way he rearranges his entire life at the slightest hint she might want to see him. And even if she doesn't consciously notice it, she feels it. And what she feels is neediness disguised as affection. The brutal truth most men don't want to hear is that women aren't drawn to men who need them. They're drawn to men who value themselves so deeply that they won't beg for anyone's attention, no matter how much they like her. Her real desire is mutual. Real connection flows naturally. When a man starts chasing after a woman who's lukewarm, who's giving mixed signals, or who clearly isn't investing back, he's stepping into emotional quicksand. The harder he tries, the deeper he sinks into a dynamic where he's performing for her approval instead of standing in his worth. And once that dynamic is set, it's almost impossible to reverse. Because the moment a woman senses that a man values her attention more than his own dignity, her respect for him begins to dissolve. She may entertain him for a while, she may even use him as a backup option, but deep down, attraction turns into pity. And pity is a feeling a woman can never unsee. Once it's there, a high-value man understands that his attention is a gift, not a plea. He doesn't overextend himself to be noticed. He doesn't flood a woman with calls, texts, or desperate attempts to prove he's worth her time. He moves with the quiet confidence that says, "I know what I bring. And if you don't see it, that's your loss, not my own." That kind of energy speaks louder than any words. Because women don't just listen to what a man says, they feel the energy of how he sees himself. The less you chase, the more respect you command. The less you beg, the more curiosity you create, and the more you hold your power, the more likely it is that the right woman will step forward willingly without you ever having to force her attention. Step 2. Never overshare your insecurities too soon. There's a fine line between authentic vulnerability and emotional overexposure that many men cross without even realizing it. Vulnerability, when shared with strength and awareness, builds connection. It signals emotional maturity, honesty, and depth. But when a man spills his deepest fears, wounds, and unresolved insecurities too soon, especially in the early stages of a relationship, it doesn't create closeness, it creates discomfort. Instead of making a woman feel trusted, it places an invisible emotional burden on her shoulders. She moves from seeing you as a potential partner to subconsciously feeling like your emotional caretaker, and that shift is a quiet death sentence to attraction. What men often think is openness, women often experience as unfiltered emotional need, and nothing drains desire faster than a man who dumps his unhealed baggage into a space that was never meant to hold it. Sharing your insecurities is not the problem. It's the timing, the depth, and the intention behind it. When you meet a woman, especially in the early stages, you're not laying your soul bare. You're allowing trust to build naturally over time. You're letting connection grow through mutual experience, not forced confessions. Shares about his childhood wounds, his self-doubts, or his heartbreaks before emotional intimacy is earned, isn't being vulnerable. He's seeking emotional validation. And when a woman senses that your openness comes from a need for her approval or her sympathy, she stops seeing you as emotionally strong and starts seeing you as emotionally unstable. Vulnerability shared too soon feels less like a gift and more like an emotional debt you expect her to carry. Insecurity, when handled with self-awareness, can be a point of connection later in a relationship. But when you lead with it, when you feel the need to confess every fear, apologize for every perceived flaw, or explain your emotional scars as if they define you, you're not showing strength, you're advertising your self-doubt. And a man who doesn't believe in his own worth silently asks a woman to believe in him on his behalf. That's not connection, that's emotional outsourcing. The irony is, the very thing you think will make her feel closer often pushes her further away. Because no woman wants to feel responsible for holding a man together before she even knows if she can trust him with her heart. Women are drawn to men who know how to hold space for their own emotions. Men who can feel deeply, but don't collapse under the weight of those feelings. Men who have processed their insecurities enough to share them in a way that feels honest, not heavy. Emotional sharing becomes powerful when it's timed right. When it's earned through genuine trust, when it comes from a place of self-awareness, and when it's shared without an unspoken plea for reassurance. Because ultimately, a man's ability to reveal his inner world isn't judged by what he shares. It's judged by how grounded he remains in the sharing. It's judged by whether his vulnerability feels like a reflection of strength or a cry for rescue. Step 3. Never tolerate disrespect. Every relationship, whether romantic, personal, or professional, runs on an unspoken agreement of mutual respect. And the standard you set at the beginning becomes the standard the other person will keep following. The moment you allow disrespect, even in subtle forms, you silently give permission for it to continue. Disrespect doesn't always show up in loud arguments, insults, or blatant betrayal. Sometimes it's disguised in sarcasm that cuts a little too deep, in dismissive comments about your opinions, in passive-aggressive jokes at your expense, or in a consistent lack of appreciation for your effort and presence. And when you let these moments slide under the excuse of, "It's not a big deal," or "She didn't mean it like that," you're not being mature. You're being complicit in teaching her how little she has to value you. Respect is never accidental. It's cultivated by the way you carry yourself, and by the boundaries you uphold when others test them. Women, whether they realize it or not, are constantly reading the silent cues you send. The way you respond when she pushes a boundary, the way you carry yourself when she crosses a line, the way you handle disrespectful behavior, all of it tells her exactly how much she should respect you. And when you choose silence in the face of consistent disrespect, you communicate that your dignity is negotiable, that you'd rather be liked than respected, that you're willing to shrink your standards just to keep her attention. And no woman, no matter how much she cares, can genuinely admire a man who stands quietly in the face of disrespect. A high-value man isn't triggered by every minor issue, nor does he engage in petty power plays, but he also doesn't tolerate behavior that diminishes his worth. He knows the difference between playful banter and toxic disrespect, between a light-hearted joke and a passive-aggressive jab. And the moment a woman crosses that line, he doesn't explode, accuse, or retaliate. He simply sets the record straight with calm, unshakable clarity. Sometimes that means speaking directly to the behavior with confidence. Other times, it means creating distance and stepping back from a dynamic that's become unhealthy. But what he never does is stay silent in the hope that things will magically correct themselves. Because silence in moments of disrespect doesn't earn peace, it breeds resentment and invites repeat behavior. When you tolerate disrespect, you shift the entire energy of the relationship. You move from being a man she looks up to and values to a man she subconsciously dismisses. And it happens faster than most men realize. The first time you let a disrespectful comment pass without addressing it, The first time you allow her to manipulate your time or mock your values, the first time you compromise your dignity for the sake of harmony, you lose a piece of her respect that is hard, if not impossible, to win back. And once respect erodes, attraction soon follows. Because a woman can desire a man for his looks, his charm, or his presence, but she will only stay with the man she deeply respects. Step 4. Never make her the center of your world. One of the biggest mistakes men make, especially when they finally find a woman they're deeply attracted to, is abandoning their sense of self. In the process of trying to keep her, they shift their entire focus, energy, and priorities toward her, slowly making her the center of their world. What starts as genuine care or excitement quietly turns into emotional dependence. The danger in this isn't always obvious at first, because most women appreciate being pursued or valued. But the second a woman senses that a man's life revolves entirely around her, that his happiness, confidence, and sense of purpose depend on her presence, the dynamic starts to change in ways he can't control. She moves from feeling desired to feeling suffocated, from feeling admired to feeling burdened by his emotional reliance. And that shift quietly erodes attraction and respect, sometimes beyond repair. A man who makes a woman the center of his world signals, whether he realizes it or not, that he has nothing else going on that gives his life meaning. He becomes the man who's always available, who drops his plans, abandons his goals, and adjusts his entire schedule at her slightest request. At first, this might feel flattering to her ego, but deep down, it creates an unspoken imbalance. Women are drawn to men with purpose, with direction, with a life that commands their focus. They admire a man who values them deeply, but never more than he values his mission. When a man sacrifices his ambition, hobbies, friendships, and personal standards just to keep a woman close, he communicates that his life isn't driven by passion or vision, it's driven by fear of losing her. Women don't want to be a man's world, they want to be a part of a man's world that's already full. They want to join a life that is moving, growing, thriving, a life that has meaning beyond the relationship itself. Because a man without purpose becomes a man without polarity, and without polarity, attraction dies. When a man anchors his entire identity on making a woman happy, he unintentionally puts pressure on her to be his source of fulfillment. That pressure suffocates love. It shifts the energy from healthy desire to emotional neediness. It drains the spark and replaces it with silent resentment, even if neither of them can fully articulate why. A woman starts to feel like she's no longer choosing to be with the man she admires. She's carrying the emotional weight of a man who's abandoned himself. A high-value man knows his life is his responsibility, his growth, his mission, his direction. Those things come first, not out of selfishness, but out of alignment. Because when a man is rooted in his purpose, he brings his best self into every relationship. He's grounded, focused, and emotionally balanced. He doesn't need a woman to complete him or make him feel significant. His life is already filled with meaning, and the woman who joins him on that journey feels inspired by his strength, not drained by his need. That's the man who holds a woman's attention without ever having to cling to it. That's the man who leads in love without losing his center. Step 5. Never try to control or fix her. One of the most damaging things a man can do in a relationship is assume it's his job to control or fix a woman. It often doesn't come from malice. It comes disguised as care, concern, or even love. But underneath the surface, it's almost always rooted in fear and insecurity. A man who tries to control a woman's choices, behavior, or emotions is usually afraid of losing her, afraid of feeling powerless, or afraid of facing his own discomfort when she doesn't fit into the version of her he wants. Control often masks itself as protection, but it always feels like suffocation to the one on the receiving end. Because control, no matter how gently it's presented, says you're not enough as you are, so let me manage you into who I need you to be. And no woman who values herself will ever thrive under a man who makes her feel smaller in the name of love. Trying to fix a woman is just another form of disguised control. It looks like constantly pointing out her flaws under the pretense of helping her improve, giving unsolicited advice about her personality, her choices, her friends, or her lifestyle, or positioning yourself as the wise one who knows better. A man who does this might believe he's being a leader in the relationship, but what he's actually doing is eroding trust and creating emotional distance. Because leadership in love isn't about changing someone. It's about inspiring them through example, not manipulation. Real connection happens when a man accepts a woman for who she is, not when he tries to mold her into his ideal partner. The second you step into the role of fixer, you step out of the role of partner and into the role of silent controller. The man who controls a woman may win her compliance for a while, but he will never win her heart. Compliance comes from fear, manipulation, or guilt. But real love can't breathe in those conditions. A woman might stay physically present when she feels controlled, but emotionally, she will begin to shut down. She will feel the silent weight of being measured, corrected, and managed, instead of being embraced. And even if she doesn't express it openly, over time, that silent frustration builds into resentment, and resentment becomes the silent killer of intimacy. Control doesn't create closeness. It creates emotional walls that words alone can't tear down. Once they're built, a high-value man understands that the healthiest relationships are not about ownership, control, or correction. They're about respect, autonomy, and shared growth. He knows that love is not a project to manage, but a connection to nurture. He accepts that he can influence through his actions, inspire through his consistency, and lead through his strength, but never by force, fear, or manipulation. He's grounded enough to stand beside a woman as her equal, not over her as her keeper. Because the strongest bond isn't built when a man tries to fix a woman. It's built when he chooses to love her while letting her be fully herself. Step 6. Never abandon your masculine frame. Your masculine frame isn't an act you put on when you're trying to impress someone. It's the grounded, unshakable energy you carry, no matter who's in front of you. It's the quiet confidence of knowing who you are, what you stand for, and how you move through the world, even when situations test your patience or emotions try to pull you off center. A man who holds his masculine frame doesn't mean he's cold, detached, or emotionally numb. It means he knows how to regulate his responses instead of reacting on impulse. It means he doesn't fold under pressure, doesn't abandon his standards to keep someone close, and doesn't lose himself just because a woman challenges his ego. Your masculine frame is the invisible backbone of how you show up, and once you let it collapse, everything else starts to crumble with it, especially respect and attraction. Men lose their frame when they become overly reactive, when they get easily triggered, emotionally manipulated, or caught in constant validation-seeking behavior. It happens when a woman tests his patience, and instead of responding with calm clarity, he lashes out, begs for her approval, or tries to please her at the cost of his own self-respect. It shows up when he starts chasing for answers, demanding reassurance, or trying to fix every emotional shift in the relationship as if it's his personal responsibility to manage her moods. And while the world might tell men that being emotional and expressive makes them more attractive, the deeper reality is this: a man who cannot hold his center under pressure becomes emotionally unsafe, and no woman will feel truly drawn to a man she perceives as emotionally weak or unstable. Your masculine frame isn't about being stoic or emotionless. It's about being emotionally sovereign. It's about mastering your reactions instead of letting the moment master you. A man who can feel deeply without letting those feelings control his actions holds a rare kind of power. He becomes the calm in the chaos, the grounded energy in emotional storms, the steady presence that commands respect without ever having to demand it. Women naturally test a man's frame, not out of cruelty, but because they want to feel the strength of a man who won't collapse under emotional tension. They want to know you won't crack the moment things get uncomfortable, that you can stand firm without needing to dominate or disappear. Holding your masculine frame is about consistency. Consistency in your words, your actions, your emotions, and your values. It's about not shrinking to avoid conflict or overextending yourself to win approval. It's about refusing to let lust, fear, or insecurity pull you into behaviors that betray your own standards. The man who keeps his frame doesn't just attract women. He earns their lasting respect. Because in a world where so many men either suppress their emotions or drown in them, the man who can feel, lead, and remain grounded stands out without even trying. He holds his ground when tested, speaks with calm certainty, and navigates every interaction with the quiet strength of someone who knows his worth isn't up for negotiation. A man doesn't lose a woman because he isn't good enough. He loses her because he forgets how to hold himself like a man. In every relationship, your energy sets the tone before your words ever do. When you beg for attention, overshare your wounds, tolerate disrespect, abandon your purpose, try to control her, or lose your masculine frame, you're not just losing her respect, you're losing yourself. And nothing is more unattractive than a man who trades his power for a temporary connection. This isn't about playing hard to get. It's about standing so firmly in your worth that respect becomes the only language you speak. So remember, real men don't chase validation. They lead with presence, protect their dignity, and never forget that the right woman is drawn to the man who never abandons himself trying to keep her.